security there. You can disregard her away with handing device.
Mr. Chairman, how are you? Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon, Chief. We'll let everybody kind of click into Zoom. So the good news is, I think we're in the near future we'll be hosting a in-person police, fire, and EMS.
That will be nice.
That will be nice. All right. I'm just looking through the attendance list, so we give everybody just a minute here. Chief, did you have anybody, or did Lori have anybody that was unable to make the meeting?
I didn't have anyone respond with that, no.
Okay, thank you, Lori. I think we got everybody. You get everybody, Chief?
I'll call roll if you would like, Mr. Chairman.
That'd be perfect. Thank you, Chief.
Dr. Willman. I don't see Dr. Willman. Mr. Sanders.
Here.
Mrs. Crandall.
Chief's here.
Mr. Egebright. I see.
Here.
Yep. Mr. Karyakis.
Here, sir.
Mr. Shonacase. See, there's Dan right there.
Present.
Mr. Jadis. I thought I saw him.
Was on.
Ron does not have his video on and his phone's muted.
Okay, we do see that he's logged in, but again, as Laurie mentioned, his video and phone are not activated, or sound. Mr. Conrad. Mr. Conrad is present. Mr. Gordon. I don't see Mr. Gordon. And Mr. Vasquez.
Present.
Thank you, everyone. Mr. Chairman, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Chief. Okay, so we're going to call the meeting to order regarding old business. Can we, the minutes from April 27th, 2021 have been distributed. Are there any comments? If there's no comments, is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
Okay. So motion approved by Mr. Sanders, and then second by, who is the
Jack
second?
Vasquez.
Thank you, Jack. By Jack Vasquez. All those in favor, just raise your hand, aye, or say aye if you're on mute. Everybody approved unanimously. Any nays? No nays, and so unanimously approved. So moving on. So new business, the chair report. So aldermanic update. Obviously, I think everybody's aware we have a couple new developments. We have a new mayor since April. It's been a couple months. Mayor Charles Ream has been in. We had our first aldermanic retreat last week, which we went over three main topics. The one of the main topics will be the primary content for this evening, which is the fire task force report. The second topic was with regards to the budget and really kind of looking at a 5-year city budget, and also looking at reserves and different different areas with regards to revenues and expenses. And the last one was with regards to commissions, and it's really looking at a couple commissions that are might be rolled into one under the Parks and Rec or Parks and Trails, Conservation, and Art. And then there was mention of creating a new commission with regards to the economic development from that standpoint. So more to come on that. If any questions or if you'd like to see more around that, it is on Zoom. It's on the city website. It's YouTube. My apologies. It's download it and you can watch it off there if you need or would like to do so. But today we're going to go over the Fire and EMS Task Force, and we're going to change the agenda a little bit. We're going to have both the fire chief, police chief, and then the fire marshals updates first. And then city administrator, Mr. Shelton, has joined us, and he will be going through the fire and EMS task force update. So Chief Cavens, or Chief Sadler, we'll start with you.
Yes, sir. And can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thanks for having me. Just wanted to give a brief update in light of the updated agenda. I won't belabor it. New ladder truck is going in service either later on tonight or tomorrow. It's been a lot of fun putting that thing together. It will be in service at Station 1. Otherwise, completing some projects around the fire district, concrete projects coming up, coming to completion. Did have a little bit of a relatively minor, in the grand scheme of things, fire in Muirfield this past about a week ago that I'm sure some of the people are aware of, but no one was injured, thankfully, and the damage was kept to a minimum. And beyond that, I'll open the floor up for questions.
Any questions for Chief Sadler? Seeing none.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Chief. All right, Chief Cavens, your report, please.
Good afternoon, everybody. Nice to see everybody's smiling faces. Real quickly, just to update you on the PD remodel, all the offices are complete. The hallway is completed. The kitchen should be, keeping our fingers crossed, should be completed by the end of this week. There were some delays with some of the countertops because of COVID-related manufacturing problems, but we're hopeful that will be completed by the end of the week. The contractors will then come back and do some final touch-ups, and we should be ready to go for visits from all of our commissioners. The one thing I do regret is that I did not take some of the before and after pictures to show all of you, to show the differences of how, for those that haven't been in, how our offices did look compared to what they look like now. It is a total difference when it comes to efficiency, professional looking and modern looking presentation of all of our offices. We're all very proud of the way it turned out. The second item is Lieutenant John Flanagan. As I announced to everybody at our last meeting, and he took his last off-duty call on last Thursday at 3 o'clock. It was a rather emotional event for him and for many of those here, both in the city in general and at the police department who have worked with John for decades. He is currently on vacation time. He's on the books until about mid-August, and I will continue to update all of you on any type of event that may or may not be planned for him in the near future. So I will keep you all posted on that. With his retirement, obviously comes an opening. We did written test processing on Thursday, the 10th. We were kind of pleased with the number of applicants that we had. Originally, we had 13 applicants. 11 showed up for the written test. In comparison to some of our neighboring agencies and their turnouts, we're Lieutenant Walker and Captain Defoe, who spearhead that task. We're pretty pleased with, we would like to have more, but 11 in comparison to some of what our neighboring agencies got, we're happy with it. So we had 11 tested. The next process for those 11 is a lieutenant's interview, and those will take place during the last week of July. So those will probably take place after our next meeting. So sometime in August, if we narrow it down to a particular candidate, I'll notify everybody by email. If not, be looking forward to the announcement at the end of August, because we'll look to do a hiring hopefully sometime around mid-September. And that's all I have, unless anybody's got any questions.
First off, any questions for the chief?
Mr. Conrad.
Yes, sir. The Durangos you got in from Kansas Highway Patrol, are those as good as expected?
The Durango we didn't get from Kansas Highway Patrol. That was a new purchase. We are confident it will be. It really looks good. It has not been placed into service yet because we're waiting on the camera system to be installed.
Thank you.
But it really looks sharp.
Other questions for Chief Cavins? Seeing none. Couple things. So Lieutenant Flanagan's retirement, he is the longest tenured employee in their town TCB, town and country staff. Is that correct, Chief?
Yes.
Okay. And so from what I understand, Captain Defoe comes in a little bit after, so he's the new longest tenured staff.
Correct.
All right, so we're hoping a lot out of both of them, but I appreciate the whole commission's. I know we have another email going with regards to that celebration and their input from that standpoint. I appreciate that. So okay, well, thank you, Chief. Moving on to the Fire Marshal Phipps report. Fire Marshal Phipps.
Mr. Chairman, I have nothing to report.
Okay, thank you, Fire Marshal Phipps. All right, so Mr. Shelton, thank you for joining us today. Obviously, this is a important topic that we've been working on for 9+ months, and fire and EMS. So it's the Fire EMS Task Force, which was 5 residents and 2 aldermen that have developed part of this report. Some of these questions, this has been before the Ways and Means Commission. This has been before the Board of Aldermen. So we wanted everybody on the police, fire, and EMS to see the findings of this, ask questions, just as a kind of a overall. This is the beginning of a talking point and education piece, and then we determine where we go. There's no vote. There's no recommendation at the end of this. As we're progressing through, at the end, I'll kind of go through some of the board comments. But Mr. Shelton, if you would start the presentation.
Definitely. Thank you, Alderman. Lori, if you can go ahead and bring up the PowerPoint for us, that would be great. Okay, so just as a little bit of background, Lori, you can go ahead and go to the next one if you don't mind. Perfect. So the West County EMS and Fire began contracting with the City of Town and Country in 1983. Our current fire station was opened in 1991, so 30 years ago. The population in Town and Country has more than tripled since 1980, and call volume has more than doubled since 1992. And then resource allocation has basically remained unchanged since the inception of the contract. I do, as we move to the next slide, Lori, if you want to go ahead. Thank Chief Sadler, and I know some of the information we'll be going over today, for those of you especially who have been on this task force, have seen this information, but we wanted to get it all concise in one report. So the Fire Task Force was appointed in June of 2020. They began meeting in July of 2020. They held 12 meetings, and the initial mission was to review renewing our current contract with the fire district. So Chief Sadler and his board did offer the extension through 2020 to allow us to go through this process. The only amendment to the extension was an increase in 2022 of approximately $40,000 in capital. And that's because the city's capital contribution had been under what the district actual expense is. So Lloyd, if you go next. Issues identified by the task force, extended response times towards 1 and 4, frequently outside the national standards, unbalanced service delivery across the city, heavy reliance on automatic aid due to increased call volume, and inefficient fire station causing significantly increased operating expenses. Next. So we also mapped out, the task force wanted to get an idea of surrounding stations. So as you all will see, in the middle is our existing station, and then all surrounding fire stations. So you can see the Creve Coeur stations, Frontenac, the other West County stations, Metro West, De Pere, Monarch. Next. So a little bit of information according to the American Heart Association. Obviously, time is critical. Brain damage begins in 4 to 6 minutes. Brain damage is irreversible in 8 to 10 minutes, and circulation must be restored within 4 to 6. Next. Response times for fire calls under 4 minutes is also critical in reducing injury or death and major property loss. Next. So response times exceeding 8 minutes. And again, I'm sure you all have seen this information, especially those who've been on the force, but are on the commission. Ward 1 averaged 306, Ward 2, 123, Ward 3, 149, and Ward 4, 717. And this information was provided by West County Fire District. Next. The chief had also provided some average response times throughout from 2015 to 2020 based on ward and broken out for EMS and non-EMS. And so again, as you can see, and has been consistent over the years, the response times to 1 and 4 are high, but also you can see Ward 2 and Ward 3 are exceeding that 4-minute for your non-EMS and at times your EMS. Next. So Chief Sadler, if there's some specific questions on this chart, you would need to explain this, but obviously incident response times, this is much more detailed, but the far left bar on each one, and it breaks it out into the fire district as a whole, all of town and country, and then by ward. And again, Ward 1 and Ward 4 have those times that are exceeding the 4 minutes, and even significant, times that are even exceeding 8 minutes. Next. So there were some questions that came up during the process about transport time, turnaround time, how much automatic aid we were receiving compared to how much from the town and country station, how many calls were being run. And we'll have a little bit more information on that automatic aid. And then also there were questions about the breakdown of the types of calls that are being run. So you can see medical facilities, and this included assisted living, skilled nursing, doctor's offices were 36%, residential properties were 31%, outdoor and roadways were 15%, and then business commercial were 7%. Next. So yeah, again, a little bit more detail on the response and the automatic aid. 17,115 responses into town and country. So 4.3 per day. And then compared to 2,278 unit responses out of town and country. So obviously reliant on automatic aid to support our community. Next. So we did go through this information with the commission. None of this information has changed as far as the cost that we've associated with it. We did provide a little bit more information, and we will email this out to the commission. But when we analyzed with the Fire and EMS Task Force, they wanted to provide a little bit more detail on, for example, on option 1, downside, the last bullet, that this did not really address long-term service needs. And even when there was discussion on the current station, trying to invest some money to get it to be more energy efficient, we put in 1.5 million. I don't know that you can put enough money in just based on the design of our current fire station to make it energy efficient, just because of the construction. So this was option 1, which was status quo, other than trying to return the staffing of 4 on the pumper, 2 on the ambulance, and trying to make some improvements to the facility. Next, Lori. Option 2 was just to close our current station, build 1 new station located in a yet to be determined spot. We've had reports in the past that obviously show there is no one central good location for town and country. But this then also gave the pros and cons. Obviously, some of the downside is we still don't address the long-term needs, and trying to sell this facility is not, it is a fire station. It's not ready to be used as an office or some other facility. So then we looked at some response times. And so Lori, if you can go to the next. This assumes either option 1 or option 2, because you're still just going to have 1 station. And as you can see on the charts, the darker your colors get, and we'll give these maps for all of the scenarios, the darker your colors get, the longer your response times. So you want lighter colors. And if you can see it on your screen, there are even response times. So if you look toward the bottom, there are areas that are 6 minutes. If you look towards the top, you're also at 6 minutes. So that's that map. Lori, next. Option 3 was keep our existing station, build 1 new station. One of the downsides presented with this was we still have our existing station, which would not give you 2 strategically located stations. And then obviously we still have the challenges with that existing older building. So then we'll go to the next slide, please. Option 3 light, again, maintains our current station, but instead of having a fully operational second station, we would just have either an ambulance or a pumper. I believe we discussed with this group that it is a typical model, and the fire chief would definitely recommend a pumper or a ladder at this other facility because the ambulance does not have firefighting capabilities. So that's 3 light, as we like to call it. And so now we'll show the map for either of these, either 3 or 3 light, which again, you can see, keep your existing station, which is right in the middle, and then you add another station, which would be basically in the vicinity of the salt mill, which is out there in the vicinity of 40 and 141. And you start to see lighter response times, lower numbers on your map. Okay, next. Option 4, city builds 2 new stations. So this would be sell or reuse the current station, strategically locate 2 stations, one out near the salt mill, and then one in the vicinity of potentially City Hall. So obviously there's more expense involved with this. The city would have to take on owning and operating these facilities, constructing these facilities, designing these facilities. And so if we can go to the next, similar scenario would be have 2 new stations, but to be annexed into the fire district. Again, I know we discussed these options before. And so the Fire and EMS Task Force did recommend either option 4 or 5 to have 2 new stations. And then Lori, if you can go to the map for these. So then obviously you see much lighter. And again, station in the vicinity of City Hall, station in the vicinity of the salt mill, and you see lower numbers, lighter colors, better response times, better resources. Next. The overall finance, the task force reviewed tax rates paid in Town and Country compared to comparable cities. Town and Country is the only area city without either a property tax, a fire safety sales tax, or not in a fire district. So as the board said, we're a unicorn. We're the only ones that operate this way. And then the task force also identified that the average Town and Country residential property owner pays $1,000 less annually than neighboring communities. Next. The task force considered the increasing cost of maintaining the older building and the inefficiencies and the overall stress on the city funding created by paying the $4 million annually from our general fund, which no other area cities do. Next. And this is just a property tax bill ranking. As you can see, Town and Country is down at the bottom with your property tax rate of 6.2834, your sales tax rate of 8.863. The only lower was the De Pere residents who are in the Kirkwood School District, and their property tax is slightly lower. Obviously, their sales tax is significantly higher.
Yeah, Lori, could you increase that and zoom in on that so everybody can take a look at that, please? Thank you.
And also for the board, we had a 3-hour retreat, and this presentation will not be 3 hours, but we did go much more in depth into finances with the board in addition to this information. Okay, and then I think I have 1 or 2 more and we should be finishing up. So this is the cost per square foot. This was provided by Chief Sadler in the fire district. The operational cost per square foot of all their stations, and the purple one is station 3, the Town and Country station. So as you can see, the utility cost is significantly higher operationally. Next. Again, just to summarize the options that were identified, basically option 1 was no service changes, slightly increased staffing. Option 2 was replace the existing station with a new one with either aerial or a pumper. Option 3 was add a new station and keep the existing station. Going down to the bottom left, this was 3 light, add a new station, and then with just an ambulance or a pumper, and then keep our existing station. Then option 4, build 2 new stations, the city operating those stations and contracting with the fire district. Option 5, join the fire district. I think might be one more, and that might be it. One more. Oh, 2 more. Task force recommended 2 new fully equipped stations, and they also identified the fire district could deploy the task force recommendations more efficiently with less financial impact to the residents than the city could. And then I know, now there's one more. Our committee, Alderman Sue Allen, Alderman Ryan Mortland, your commission member, Don Sanders, Todd Solomon, George Tarlos, Amber Walsh. And again, thanks to Chief Sadler. He participated and was extremely helpful. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Shelton. And also thank you, Mr. Sanders, for your time and service on that task force. So we're going to open up to questions at this point for either the task force, Mr. Shelton. One item that was discussed that wasn't really a full purview of the task force was the ancillary benefits with regards to a police substation and or public works, another location there. But the other from the aldermanic update is the budget's coming, and with COVID, we do have a and Mr. Shelton, you may get the name for the ARA fund that's going to help fund the city for the next year and put some of the sales tax that was missing back in. But in the end, there is going to be a budget issue regardless of this fire issue. So as a city, we need to be looking at not only how do we keep public safety at top of mind, but also how do we economically and safely take care of the overall city. So anything to add on that, Mr. Shelton?
No, you're exactly right. We knew pre-COVID, we had a shortfall. Revenue is not keeping up with expenses despite all of our efforts to maintain those expenses.
Yeah, and for the commissioners that didn't see that other, so any municipality that takes in more than 50% of their revenues in sales tax, the desired reserve limit is 50%. And so that's where we're, the sales tax, obviously with some of retail going down and some other stuff in COVID is a big concern. So, but I'd like it to open it up to questions for Mr. Shelton, the chief, with regards to the presentation on the fire task force report and recommendation. Jim, go ahead.
Yeah, my question is, I was kind of surprised at the number of mutual aid responses into Town and Country. And my first question is, are you including the responses from your station 1 and 2, Chief, in that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So
those are responses into Town and Country that are not handled by the Town and Country equipment.
Okay. Now, where are you getting the other help from?
Outside agencies.
What other department?
Frontenac, Creve Coeur, Metro West, Monarch, Ladue.
Yeah, I just wondered if that balance was way off where they'd be complaining.
I think everybody has an eye on automatic aid all the time. It's not so much a complaint as it is an observation.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I know it was a lot to digest. Other questions? Any other? Mr. Shenekes.
So procedurally, does the Board of Aldermen have the power to make the final call on this for the property tax hike to fund it, or does that have to go to the voters and get approved? And then what's the timeline like on any of those recommendations that are taken up?
So procedurally, from a property tax standpoint, a property tax can be, and Mr. Shelton, you might clarify here, can be levied in a even number year. So we the Board of Aldermen discussed it last year. It was deemed, let's get through COVID and see where we were. So there wasn't a property tax on the levied. And then with regards to anything with the fire district, it would definitely go to the people. So it would be on a vote and an agenda. Mr. Shelton, you want to clarify for me?
That's correct. Yeah, the city has previously had a tax levy up to $1. You've also had a tax levy for the fire and EMS dispatch, which currently is now paid out of the general fund. So the board could levy, as the alderman said, up to a certain amount. It's approximately 46 cents. But if you were to be annexed into the fire district, that would require a vote, and anything above 46 cents would require a vote.
Yeah, and so, Mr. Shenecase, anything below 46 cents, the Board of Aldermen can vote on. Interesting thing that I wasn't aware of. I know we haven't had property tax for a long time. Ms. Shelton, when was the last time we had a property tax in Town and Country?
I think it was like the late 70s.
Yeah, so they haven't had a property tax, and we're kind of, as you said, unicorn, but I'd like to say the exception. We do not have a fire district. We're not part of a fire district, so there's not a tax, and we do not have any property tax or fire use tax. The pair has a fire use tax to fund their fire department. Other questions? Susan.
Okay, so have we known this is contracts coming up for some time, and has it been the expectation over the last, say, 10 years that we would always just keep signing a contract, or have we ever saved for a rainy day, so to speak, or is this a surprise to us?
So Susan, one, I haven't been here for 10 years. I've only been here for 2. Well,
maybe Mr. Shelton or Chief Sattler or somebody might know.
Yeah, I've been here for 3.5, and I don't know that we've really had the discussion of where's the long-term future of our fire service. We have talked finances, but I think we've always assumed that we would renew for our contract services, but without really looking into it. So I will tell you that we keep the 50% fund balance as per the code, but there is not excess revenue in our operating budget to put into a rainy day fund. That would be good if we did have that, but we don't. And while I have the floor, I will correct, the last time the city had a levy to property tax was 1996.
1990?
96.
96. Okay, thank you. All right, Pete, I saw you had your hand up.
Yes, one of the things I think we ought to consider here is this will affect people's insurance rates. You know, if we have good fire protection, if we're rated highly, there's probably going to be some favorable cost impact on people's homeowners insurance, and that ought to be something that's brought up. If we are going to impose some more taxes, let people know this is improving service and there may be some cost savings involved there. I know we're lucky where we are, but other people are not, so there may be some advantages there.
Thank you, Pete, for that comment. Other questions or other comments?
Hey, Ryan, quick question. Has there been any research done yet on if we went down this recommendation path, what the value or approximate value or any value of the current fire station would be how it would be rezoned potentially or sold? Has anybody even looked at that yet? Just out of curiosity.
It was discussed, but I'm going to let Mr. Shelton see if he has a comment on that.
Right, it would definitely depend on what the use, what the city was willing to rezone that as, would determine the value. But I can tell you, anybody that's been through the building, it would take significant renovations, there's limited parking. And so there would be limited opportunity. So, but to answer your question, we haven't done an appraisal.
Okay, thank you.
Is that what's driving a lot of the task force's recommendation, is the condition of the current station with going with two brand new kind of full size options?
I would say that
dumping money into a place that might look from the outside pretty nice, but
condition and location, that it's not strategically located, assuming you would need two facilities of some type.
Yeah, Mr. Shenecase, I would say that, you know, the overall, the health and public safety of our citizens in all wards is what is the primary driver. The economic driver side is the station, but it's really the looking at the response time and just, you know, overall long-term, you know, the buildings can still, you know, be managed and maintained. It's not ideal, but eventually we're going to have this decision to come up on the building to where we need, if we're not planning now, 10 years from now, we're going to have a bigger problem. And so that's why we're trying to get ahead of this problem. That's what I would say. Other questions?
Well, the two sites that we've been discussing are kind of what we're seeing as the optimal available sites here.
I'm gonna bring in both Mr. Shelton and Chief Sadler on this. I would say is there's been a couple options discussed, and one is based on what land the city owns. So I'm gonna let Mr. Shelton talk about that, and then two is what GPS would say from a timing and a response time, and let Chief Sadler talk about that.
Right, I would definitely say, I think it's a combination, that there are a couple of strategic locations that the city does have some available property.
Chief Sadler?
Yeah, I think it is a combination of both. It just so happens that the ideal location by GIS for the ward area over in Ward 4 was the sawmill location, and we're just working with the available property, just kind of plugging data in on the further east side where City Hall, that area of Municipal Center and Clayton, and those sites just work.
Okay, I'm just thinking of how this gets presented to our citizens here. Obviously, you guys have done a lot of really good due diligence and looking at everything, but typically when you're going to want to increase taxes or whatever is going to happen here, the better case we make, the more likely we are to be successful in achieving what we're after here.
Most definitely, Pete, and that's kind of like what all this conversation is. This is the findings. The Board of Aldermen have discussed bringing in a third-party consultant to do a review. In addition, all along before any kind of recommendation was made was to educate the citizens. This isn't something that just goes through the Board of Aldermen. The end goal was this was very informed, very public, and then also whether it's you know, Maryville CBC, you know, having open settings. Obviously, we're in COVID during some of it, but on top of that, the citizens had a choice in the matter. You know, Ward 4, Ward 1. A lot of Ward 2 and Ward 3, where I live, is served out of a separate house, in that house, and so the response times look one way, and if we can, you know, look at that overall, it's just looking at the public safety and well-being of all the citizens.
Yeah, the better we can inform our population here and let them know, well, research has been done and maybe hold some meetings if it comes to that. It's amazing how you can build consensus once people understand this wasn't an arbitrary thing. A lot of work was done. We're all in this together. Here's what we need to do. Here's why we should do it. Gain some ownership here, I think will be a real key factor.
Most definitely. And the task force also considered there's other budgetary issues going on. So it's not like this is in a silo and this is a problem by itself that can be solved by itself. And one or two of the task force committee members mentioned, hey, if we have multiple, you can solve it with, one financial. Nobody wants to pay taxes. Everybody will say that nobody wants to pay taxes. I would say the overall, the public safety of all the citizens is the most important, and overall our expectations of our citizens is pretty high. Right. And so, delivering on those expectations is really where I would stand with a lot of this conversation. Alderman Allen chairs the Ways and Means, and she wants to improve it, but is a little more cost conscious. Alderman Sanders, or not Alderman Sanders, sorry, Commissioner Sanders was on the task force and went through a lot. And in the end, it has to, the citizens and our staff and our city have to all agree on how we want to move forward, and they have to have a voice.
I think it's important to let citizens know. One of the things we like about being in town and country is people are accessible. You can go to meetings, that will happen again, and people are always responsive to what needs to go on. And there may be differences of opinion, but unlike the city of St. Louis, for instance, where it's just a giant mess, we're a much smaller entity here. We have a lot higher caliber of elected officials, and we have people that are very responsive, and citizens can get involved as they choose. That's harder to do in a bigger community, and I think we need to keep that in front of our population. Hey, you have anything to say, let us know. Let's talk about it. We'll give you all the facts. I think it's important that we let everybody know this is for everyone's benefit. We really need to deal with what's here. So I think that's all good. If we have meetings and things, that's fine. I don't know how the playground meetings have been going, but there's been a lot of opportunity there, for Ann and her group. So maybe we do something similar, whatever is appropriate. But I just think we want to continue that accessibility that we
Most definitely, Pete. And that's where kind of the next steps are going to be. And in the end, listening to Chief Sadler, Chief Cavens, they're taking care of us. So, Mr. Shelton, does anybody else have any other questions? No, any comments? All right, Mr. Shelton, do you have anything else you'd like to add to the end of that?
Nothing further.
Okay, Chief Sadler? Nope. Okay, Chief Cavens? No. All right. So we're going to distribute this via email to everyone, so everybody can review it, and we will have a follow up to it, so everybody has access. And I know this was the presentation portion of it, so making sure that they're so. Thank you, Mr. Shelton, for joining us today. Any other items that we'd like to discuss in open agenda? No? Okay.
Oh, is there a new restaurant going in at the town square?
I'm going to have Mr. Shelton address that. Are you still there, Mr. Shelton?
Still here. I'm glad I stuck around, Jim. So the developer, Bob Brinkman, had announced that the Wine Crush, which is going to be operated by PGA golfer Jay Delsing and his girlfriend, are going to operate, and they're nearing completion. I think they're shooting for an August opening. of the wine and light food and cocktails. The restaurant was announced as Mark Del Pietro, and he has not, he's pulled his building permits and I think begun, but not made the kind of progress that the Wine Crush. So the Wine Crush will definitely open first. And then I think the Del Pietro restaurant concept is Cork and Cleaver.
I think it's Cleaver and Cocktail.
Cleaver and Cocktail, thank you all.
Cleaver and Cocktail, but it's a dry aged steak and like a high-end burger, probably. So most definitely. Any other open agenda items or questions for any of the chiefs or Fire Marshal Phipps? No? Well, thank you all for your time here in June. We appreciate it. Any questions that may come up, feel free to email back on with regards to the police, fire, and EMS and the fire EMS task force. And if not, can I get a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Thank you, Kelly, and thank you, Mr. Sanders. All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, thank you. You all have a good night tonight. Thanks.
Thank you.
Safe holiday, everybody.